Welcome back, my dear students. So in this lecture, what I want to do is I want to show you how to submit post data coming from a form. Not only that, but I want to show you how to read that form and at the same time submit it using Node. Okay. So now this form is going to be included in your exercise file. So make sure that you look for a file called HTTP form submit.js. It has hyphens in between each word, or you can just find it in this lecture. If you don't find it in this lecture, make sure you find it there in the exercise files, or just ask in the discussion. Okay, so that way you don't have to write all this stuff. This is just simple. It's just simple form. It's not the best in the world. As a matter of fact, I'll show it to you right now. It looks horrible. Okay, so it's not much to it. Okay, but anyway, so let's start with this. So create another file here. This is another file called http-form-submit.js. Okay, so I already included the module http and the module file system. Okay, now let's start playing around with it. The first thing that we need is to create a server, right? So let's go ahead and create a server. And once we create a server, we're gonna get that required and the response. All right, I like the body because we need that later. All right, now let's check to see, and as a matter of fact, we have something very similar to this, but I'm not gonna copy. I'm just not gonna be lazy this time, guys. Don't try to be lazy, okay? We're gonna check the method to see if the method is get requests. Okay, and then we're gonna do something with it. First thing that I want to do is, as a matter of fact, let's just make sure that this is working. All right, before we write a lot of code. Console.log. There we go. It's working. Something like that. Let's attach the listen function here. We're going to be listening to 444. As a matter of fact, this should be down here, right here. And then this should be giving me the method like that. Okay. So let's execute this HTTP form. And then what's the other one? Submit.js, enter, and it says it's working. Once I hit that route, then we should get something else, right? And localhost 444, enter, enter, and you can see that get request right there. Okay, are you getting the flow of this? Okay, great. Looks like it's working really good. So let's go. So let's go ahead and start writing some of this information or sending it with the response. Let's first write our headers, right? Head right here, and then let's just send a 200 status with an object of content type like this, some text, and this in this case is going to be HTML. Okay, so now let's go ahead and read the file. We're gonna read that form that we created, and it's inside this directory, and it's called http hyphen form.html. Then of course it's a UTF, that's what we want. It's encoding, and then we have a callback here which is going to have an error and the data. All right, now we can say if error. We can do it like this. A whole application will crash if we have an error. This is what we're doing here. Then we are gonna just write the data to the browser, and we are going to end that like this. Okay, so let's go ahead and execute that, and let's see how it looks. Okay, this body variable that we created here, we're gonna use it later on. We have seen that before. So let's, oops, we have an error here. Let's check this out real quick. Unexpected token in rest right. Oh, right here. Let's come back. It says it's working. Let's go and hit that route and see what happens. Enter. And as you can see, we have the form now. Remember what we're doing here, okay? It's super important for you to remember. We're actually reading that file, okay? We are consuming that data. We're bringing it back with a callback function, and when we're writing it back to the browser, we are sending it back with a response. Okay, so keep that in mind. All right. So what's the next step? Well, we want to make sure that when we submit the form, we detect that. We want to detect if it's a post method, if what kind of data we got in here. We want to display that data. We want to use it somehow, right? So let's go ahead and play around with it a little bit. I always forget that I have this here. Let's we got this if statement here, so let's just create a if and else statement, right here, else and if statement. And let's just say if the required method is equal to post, then we want to do something with it, right? Let's attach a event listener here on data. So when we submit that URL, when we click on that URL, we're gonna get this callback function here with the data. Okay, and now remember here, that data that we're getting back there is post data. So let's append here some of that data to a variable like this, so that way we can use it later down here. Okay, so let's go ahead and create another event here for the end of that request for that data. And this one here does not, we should not put anything there. We don't need anything from that, because we are going to be using this end event here to detect when this is over. And then when this is over, I want to actually write something to the headers. I want to say, well, your request went okay, client. And as a matter of fact, I think I have it here somewhere. Okay, there we go. Paste that in there. And we want to write. And this function here, you can pass in the data, and you can also get a callback function here. Okay. And what we're gonna do is, once we write that data, we want to end it like this. Okay. As once we get the data, that's why we get this callback function here. Okay. Perfect. So the next step for this would be to write our else statement, right? We got our else if. Let's get the else statement here. And basically here we're just gonna write a, let's just write this, the head here. Give on the header, we're just gonna submit that information for the client. Want to let them know that something went wrong, and we want to make sure this is plain here. Simple as that. And we can end our request and write some type of data. Since this is plain data here, we can say 404. I always do that. 404. You can use template strings if you want. Error. Could not find that page or something like that. Okay. So let's check it out. I think we wrote a lot of code, and I'm going to explain to you in a minute everything we have written there. But you, this is pretty simple stuff. We're just mostly practicing. Okay, the only thing that we're doing different here would be getting that post data. Okay, so let's come back here. We got our server running. Make sure it's running. We're gonna write some data here. Submit, and you can see that data on the title here, but we're not writing it to the. I want to write it. So let's just end that. Come back again. Let's go ahead and refresh this. Write the data here and submit. That data is not being. Let's check the form. Oh, and the form, make sure that you put method as post, because if not, it's going to submit the get request, and we don't want get request. This is only detecting if we have a post request. Okay, so that's why we were getting that error there. Let's come back and right here. Sorry, I got some of the all right, title, enter, and now you can see the data written back in the browser. Okay, so let's go over to what we did. Okay, so the first thing is that we are, of course, requiring the modules. We are creating a server. We are listening to it right here, and we're of course logging in that it's working. Okay, remember that we are chaining that. You're gonna see a lot of that in JavaScript. Then we're creating this variable here because we are going to be using that variable to append some data right here. But the reason why we're doing this is because this data here is only available on this function here. If we try to take that data somewhere else, we might have a problem. This is a callback function. So that's why we're appending it here. We can use it later. So here we're detecting if we get a get request, because the first request is going to be a get request when we hit that API. We want to write the headers, make sure that we're sending a 200 status code, make sure to let the client or the application know everything is fine, right? And we're sending HTML, so get ready for it. We're reading that file with its function, making sure that the parameter here is UTF encoding, meaning that we can accept different characters. And then we're getting a callback function with the error or the data. And then here we're checking to see if the error, if we have an error, and then we throw a error here on the page. We crash the application. Then if we don't have an error, we go ahead and write the data, and then we end that response, right? Then we're checking here to see if we have post data. Once we get this, we submit the form, we get the post data, we're listening to a data event. That means when the form is submitted, right? So when that data, or you remember when every time we submit that form, the page gets refreshed, meaning a new request. We are getting that data, we are appending it to that variable, and then we're listening to an end request here, an end event. Once that's over, our request is over, we can go ahead and tell the browser, send that information in the headers, so the service can read that, right? And once we get, well, actually this is our own server, but we are sending that information so our applications can know that everything is okay, and then we are writing that back. We're sending that back with that response to the body. We're getting that callback function, and once this is in the page, or that once that response is done, we are ending that response. Just in case it doesn't, it's not a get request or it's a post request or some kind, then we see that we have an error, and we are writing that to the headers, and we are ending that response with some text. Simple as that. Now, of course, this is not perfect, and you might want to check the URL instead of the method. You want to check the URL, and at the same time, you also want to check to see if you're submitting posts data, because right now we just say checking for post data because we only have a form in there. We know that, and we only have one route, which is the root route, right? So of course this can be improved, but again, this is not something that I want you guys to focus on. I want you to digest the information. I want you to learn it, and so that way you can use it in the future for other things that we are going to be doing. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you on the next lecture.